I'd like to welcome everyone to our Hamilton County Board of Election. Today is April the 7th, 2020. Calling the meeting together at 8:32. Deborah, if you could lead us please with the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, justice forever. I'd also like to state that the proper notice has been given as required for the meeting under Order Ohio Revised Code 121.22. First, we're going to start with approval of our board meeting minutes from April the 13th and the 16th, and everyone should have received a copy of those.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the board meeting minutes for both.
I'll second.
Okay, any more discussion?
I just want to be clear.
Changes?
That was a meeting, was it not? That when we started.
Yes, it was.
So it was
Yes.
One meeting.
minutes extended.
Continuation.
Anyway, that's my motion.
Okay, and it's been seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion is carried. Our agenda is, we're going to move forward. Looks like we have a pretty short agenda. We're going to start first with the review of the ballot remakes. So I'm going to turn that over to you, Ms. Poland.
Yes, we have received ballots that are required to be remade. These ballots were remade by bipartisan teams in accordance with Secretary of State directive and board policy. And Krista Criddle, our operations administrator, and Jeremy Jamar, our election specialist, are ready to present those to the board.
Thank you. So the first set of ballot remakes are those ballots that were damaged some way that would not allow them to go through the scanner properly. A lot of times it's because of whiteout, they may have been torn through a barcode, things of that sort. So those ballots that are remade, and there's no voter intent involved in these, they are ballots A-199 through A-209, A-222 through A-257, and ballot A-352.
So there's, just to be clear, there's no question that staff had of intent. These are just straight remakes. Nothing that the director and deputy think require the board's careful approval for intent, right?
That's correct.
With that, then I'll move approval of the ballots as remade, the numbers that you already put.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. That motion carries.
The next set of ballots that we have are ballots that our 17-year-old voters have cast. 17-year-old voters are not permitted to vote on party central committee because they're only allowed to nominate candidates for the fall, and they also cannot vote on issues. So these are ballots that the 17-year-old voters have returned that did include ineligible contests. So we do have the bipartisan teams remake those to only include the contests that they were eligible to vote for.
Did you put
And-
those? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so the range for that is A-210 and through A-221.
I'll move approval of ballots A-210 through A-221 is remade to allow these voters to cast their primary ballot and not vote in the central committee races.
Second.
Any more discussion? I'm glad to see that they're 17-year-olds. Looks like a nice little stack of those that just have to be remade. So there's probably more
Yes.
that are good. So again, it's good to see that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you. The next group that we're going to present to you, it's A-258 through A-351. These are our UOCAVA voters. These are our uniformed overseas citizens who have cast ballots. Those are, if you recall, are the ones who we email the ballot, but then they have to mail back their actual votes with their ID information. And because those are not on our prescribed ballot paper, they do have to be remade. And these are all done in bipartisan teams.
Need a motion?
I'll move approval of those ballots.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? This motion is carried.
Thank you. The next group that we have are those that had stray marks on them. These are ballots A363 through A385. These are the ballots that may have a mark that goes through a barcode or goes through another choice box that would not permit the voters correct vote to count. And those were reviewed in bipartisan teams and also redone.
And there's no question that the bipartisan teams had about intent, right?
That's correct. There's no question on voter intent.
Got it. I'll move approval of ballots A363 through A385 as remade.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you. The last set of ballots do require vote, or they were questions on voter intent that we would like the board to review. These are ballots A353 through A362.
Do you want us to look at each one?
That's correct.
These were ballots that the deputy director and I reviewed, and we are in agreement on how they were remade.
I'm prepared to move approval if the director and deputy have reviewed them.
I'm comfortable with that.
So I'll make a motion that we approve those ballots as remade.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
And that's all that we had for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is update of the 2020 primary election. Sherry?
Yes, as the board is aware, on March 25th, the General Assembly passed a bill extending the 2020 primary election to April 28th, primarily an all-male election. The governor signed that bill into law on Friday, March 27th, and at 7:08 p.m. on March 27th, we received a directive instructing the board on how to carry out the remainder of that election. So we began mailing ballots that following Monday, March 30th, and through that week, as of last Monday, the 30th, through yesterday, we had mailed 22,512 ballots. To put that in perspective, in the entire month leading up to March 17th, we had mailed 22,394. So in the last week, we've mailed more ballots than we did in the entire month leading up to Election Day. And we expect that number to grow. The Secretary of State is mailing the postcard notification to all registered voters this week. So in anticipation of that, we have reached out to our print vendor, MCR, to get their assistance in outsourcing some of this responsibility. MCR provides this function to us in presidential general elections. So this is an arrangement we have with them during presidential generals anyway. They will print the ballot in the identification envelopes for us and assemble the packet because they have the machine where this can be automated compared to our manual assembly now, which we just will not be able to keep up with this volume on. So that process is beginning today. We have all 44 full-time staff members reporting to work every day. We also currently have 16 of our extras, temporary staff working, and we anticipate hiring hopefully another 16 temporary staff. We are keeping staff spread out throughout the building. Everyone has workstations that are at least 6 feet apart, and for the next round of extras we're bringing in, we actually our plan is to set up terminals in our poll worker training center that's in the back warehouse, so that can be sort of a data entry center. We also have set up a call center, which is normally our help desk on Election Day for poll workers to call into. That's now a call center for voters to call into to request an absentee application be mailed to them. So that's where we stand today. Do you have any questions regarding the primary election?
Well, I have a question. You know, it's been asked of me multiple times, what are we doing? And then how are we preparing ourselves if this comes up again? So I was wondering, have you, with all the work that you all are trying to do to catch up on everything, have you had an opportunity to prepare some type of logistical algorithm regarding the pattern and how you're doing this and what's been done, and then to measure that to see how effective it is?
We are tracking, we are collecting that data now that I think after this election would then help us to prepare if the situation arises in November. So we're collecting the data.
And analyzing it and then having some comments, what we did very well and what we possibly could have done a little better.
That's the plan in May, to take a look at all that after we certify this election.
Fantastic. That's all the questions I have.
I don't have any questions.
I'm just a little curious. I called Sally yesterday and had the clear impression from talking to her that everybody's feeling a little overwhelmed by the volume of ballots and being mailed and coming back, and just the logistics of handling all that. The numbers you just mentioned, done more in 1 week than we did in a month. And my guess is that's going to continue right up until the 28th. It strikes me that we're likely to find ourselves in a real crunch when we get close to the 28th with stuff coming back in a big, huge hurry. And ballots can be dropped off here that day. I just wondered what thoughts people have on, what's going to be our process for counting and handling all that at the last minute and releasing the results. Might not be as easy as it has been in the past.
Definitely be a challenge, as the extension of this election has been. The Secretary of State has indicated they would have guidance coming within the next week regarding election night count. So we're awaiting that guidance.
So will there be any major, do you think there's going to be any major difference, I mean, in response to what you're asking, than when the trucks are coming in? You know, when after the polls have closed, then we're waiting for the trucks to come in with the delivery of the ballots. There's going to be a slight difference, I know, because they're all going to be here. But do you see any major changes other than making sure we have plenty of staff on board?
That's key to having plenty of staff on board. I think what you'll see is the bulk of the results will be released shortly after 7:30. Typically, when we release absentee results around 7:45, 8 p.m. But we will be continuing to process and scan ballots. I do not believe we will not be completed by 7:30 p.m. on the 28th, because ballots can arrive as late as 7:30 on the 28th. And there's a process, a verification process, that the ballots have to be put through, the envelopes have to be put through before we can even open those envelopes and then scan and count them. Mm-hmm. So I would anticipate several reports throughout the night, typical on election night. It's just, rather than waiting for the trucks to come back, we're waiting for the ballots to be verified and scanned. Mm-hmm. I think something else to note, which will make a big difference, is we will not have precincts reporting. And I think that means a lot to campaigns and candidates, because that's how they tell how close we are to the end of the count, how many precincts are reporting. Because this is all absentee, there will not be precincts reporting. So that's something that we're going to work on next week after we've received some guidance from the Secretary. We're in constant communication with other boards, our counterparts in the other two large counties, as well as our regional boards of elections. We're sort of all in the same position and figuring this out as we go. So we hope to have more information in the next week on how election night reporting will work.
I do have a question now, I guess. So what about people coming here? As we know, people do come here. Have we given that any thought?
I have not yet given that thought on election night. As you know, currently we are closed to the public, with the exception of the vestibule area, where voters can receive and fill out absentee applications and put them in the drop box. I would think at the very least we would need our media to be here to film. And yes,
Access
yes.
is important, right? Yep.
Well, basically, we're still gonna be under the stay-at-home until May 1st, and this is gonna be March the 28th. So I think it's something we need to look at, because the most important concern I have is making sure we have enough staff, so that we're functioning in a bipartisan manner. And normally, once that process starts, we can publicize it as well, the results. That's what we've done in the past.
The results will be released election night. I think once we have more information and figure out our plan, we will publicize that so that the media is prepared and campaigns and they'll know what to expect election night. I do anticipate also the board meeting again before April 28th so we can stay on top of the remakes that come in. I don't have a date or a time for that yet. Sort of be as we go. If we see the need arise, then we will contact you to set up a special meeting to conduct remakes, and hopefully at that time we'll have more information on how the election night count will go.
When do we start feeding the ballots into the machines and counting?
Well, we have scanned ballots that we received through, I believe, Krista, March 30th? No, March 30th.
We've already begun that process.
We have. We're sort of on a standstill right now. It's a little bit of a lull because all the ballots that came in that people had voted through the original deadline of March 27th, those have all been scanned and processed. What we're receiving now on a daily basis is very small amounts as far as the ballots that are being returned, because those are the ones that we just began mailing out last week.
Broadcasting to the public, could you tell us what processing means versus voting?
Sure. Yes, that's a good point. So as far as processing the ballots, when voters return their ballot, they're inside an identification envelope, and the voter's required to place a form of ID and sign that identification envelope. It also contains their name and their address. So the identification envelope is reviewed by bipartisan staff at the board and compared to the voter's information in our voter registration system. If the information is there and it matches, then the ballot is removed from the identification envelope and it is scanned through one of our scanners, again by bipartisan staff at the board. The scanner that the ballots are scanned into does not have the capability of tabulating. So it's recording. We call it a cast vote record. It's recording the record of the vote that was cast. And that continues to build every day until 7:30 p.m. on April 28th. And at that time, we'll remove that data from that computer and place it into a different computer that is capable of tabulating. And that's when we tabulate, accumulate the results, and then report it on our website.
So even if we wanted to know, quote, who was winning, we can't have that information now, right?
That's correct.
I ran into a couple of people. Actually, I received telephone calls, and the question was, two of these gentlemen had just had a rotator cuff surgery on their right arm, and they're right-handed. So their ballot came in, and they were trying to figure out how to sign it like their old signatures had been. So that would possibly be a remake. I told them to do the best they could and then make a comment down there. Recent surgery of right hand.
Yes, that's helpful. And we do have a process for that. So if the information contained on that identification envelope is either missing or if it doesn't match what's on file with the board, there is a prescribed form from the Secretary of State, an 11S form, that is sent to the voter. So it gives the voter the opportunity to correct that defect and mail it back to the board and have their ballot counted. And that would be a situation that 11S form would come into play.
Oh, okay. So they couldn't print that 11S form off on the...
Well, that would be something that the board issues to the voter if we determine the signature doesn't match. Mm-hmm. If the voter indicates something to that effect, that they've had recent surgery, that happens, signatures change, then there's another form that we can send to the voter that updates their signature with the board. So there's a process for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
That when we begin opening the ballot,
Mm-hmm.
we're not having a big,
Which is why we're looking to hire an additional 16 extras.
I was trying to think of a way that would make it simpler for you all and for the voter as well. And so he asked me if my wife states, I am such and such's wife, and I'm validating that he had surgery on such and such a date on his right. So you don't want that on there, do you?
That's fine. No, any information the voter can provide to us
would
is
be
helpful.
great.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, thank you. That's good information for anyone that's watching that may be in that particular situation.
Yes, and again, we do have a call center set up that Chuck Eckert is running for us at the moment. So if voters have any questions, we encourage them to call.
Okay.
Well, I think that this is also, even though it's an unusual exercise, it's a way to show the public in a bigger way that vote by mail is effective, it's accurate, it's secure, and ultimately, your vote does count. So, to the extent that people are paying attention, I would urge you to vote by mail and not worry about the fact that that ballot will not count. If you are duly registered and you fill out the paperwork appropriately, your vote will count.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. We also have a function on our website. We've actually moved it now to the front and center of our homepage, Track My Absentee Ballot. And voters can log on there and they can track to see if whether or not we've received their application, when we mailed the ballot to them, and then when we received the ballot back, and if it was accepted for counting. So they can track that on our website.
And, I'm sorry, and if, say I'm tracking my absentee ballot and I see that it hasn't been counted yet, and I believe that it should have been counted by now, what would be my option as a voter?
To call the Board of Elections, so we can look into the matter. If a voter returns their ballot in one of those situations we discussed before where they're missing a piece of the required information on their identification envelope, that is noted on the website when they track their ballot, so they can expect to receive a form from the Board of Elections if they view that. So if they have any questions about the status of their ballot, they can always call us.
And what's that number again?
632-7000.
632-7000.
Thank you.
Just a comment about that. I went through something yesterday dealing with a voter who did have a problem with the application. She and her husband had both mailed their application here on the same date. And her husband got the ballot 4 or 5 days ago, but she didn't get one. They called here and asked what was going on, and the response they got was just that her ballot was on hold. But whoever it was that answered the phone didn't give any additional information as to what the actual problem was. And in that particular case, the problem was that the birth date that she had put on her application was 1 day different than what our records showed. And it turned out that that was because Social Security some time back had put the wrong date into their database. And that, but thinking about it, I was a little surprised that when they called and asked about the ballot, that all they got was it's on hold, not any real explanation as to what the problem was.
Right. We do have to understand that we had to bring in temporary staff to man the call center.
Right.
So that would have been answered by one of those temporary staff members. But what we call problem applications, people in those unique situations, like the voter that contacted you, those applications are being handled by our full-time staff.
Right.
So that voter will have received either a phone call, an email, and a letter. We're using all three methods to contact the voter and let them know the mistake that was made or the problem with their application.
And I think in this case, the problem was complicated by the fact that she makes it a habit not to answer the phone if she doesn't know what the phone number.
That
We,
makes
we,
sense.
we are finding, right, we are finding that out.
Right, attempting to email and phone people and
Right.
aren't answering.
And not only that, if we're using our records here, those phone numbers couldn't be null and void by now, because those phone numbers are normally not really updated on a consistent basis, am I correct?
Phone numbers on the application.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
My question was, do you know if Kroger has the applications in a particular spot, or do they just?
They should be at the customer service desk. That was the agreement with Kroger's.
Thanks.
And then explain the process. If the application, then the person does not take their completed application and leave it there, they take it home.
That's correct.
And they're
Kroger,
responsible then for finishing, completing it, putting in the mailbox, and getting it down here.
the voter's responsible for that. That's correct. Kroger agreed to allow us to distribute the applications from 15 of their stores, but it's the voter's responsibility to return it to the board.
And we don't provide an envelope, do we?
Not at the Kroger stores, no.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you to Kroger for
Yeah.
allowing us to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you to Chip Gerhart, too, who contacted leadership at Kroger and managed to get this done. So it was because of Chip's outreach.
Started right here.
Oh,
Started with Sherry.
Chip-
thank you.
Actually,
made
with,
it
it was,
happen, so.
actually with Sally. It was
Boom, boom,
Sally's
boom.
idea.
That's it. Teamwork, right?
Teamwork.
Teamwork.
That's right. Teamwork makes the dream work.
And
it's happening.
the idea quickly spread with Board of Elections across the state. So this is something that's catching on. I know Columbus just recently was able to put them in several of their Kroger stores as well.
Well, yeah, just, I think we should highlight this. Deputy Director Sally Crystal came up with the idea to put absentee ballot applications in Kroger stores. Talked to our director, who talked to me, and we talked to Kroger, and Kroger said yes. So it's, again, a bipartisan, multifaceted work that has now put absentee ballot request forms in 15 Kroger stores here in Hamilton County.
You get fuel points if you pick up a absentee app.
Oh, I like that. Right, right. Well, now, yeah, what's the, your rewards card? Well,
Right.
now you can register, no, I'm kidding. I don't want to confuse people. Right.
No, I'd also just, I think it's important to acknowledge that all of us in this room, and I want to thank Alex Trillofino we were on Denise Treehouse's meeting, and just were able to walk through and process through the process. And then I was going to call Lincoln Ware Show, and he had me online waiting, and then Sherry was ahead of me. So she was also, conversing with the media, and I don't know where else and what else everyone else is doing, but I just want to thank you for helping to get that word out, because it really does help.
Thank you. Yes, and we have our social media team and working also on trying to put out as much information as we can about this election.
Anything else? Any other thoughts or comments? Any other business?
We have the FMLA.
We have the approval of the FMLA expansion and emergency sick leave policy. Do you want to discuss that for us, Sherry?
Yes, you have in your packet a FMLA expansion and emergency sick leave policy. This would be that we are asking the board to adopt. This policy was actually drafted by the prosecutor's office based on a new federal law regarding FMLA. Basically, it expands FMLA to cover situations related to COVID-19. It actually allows employees to be eligible for 70 hours of emergency sick leave at their normal rate of pay, in addition to their accrued sick leave if they fall into certain different classifications related to COVID-19. So it's extra sick leave for staff in certain situations involving COVID-19.
I'll move approval of the amendment to the FMLA leave policy.
I'll second.
Just a point of reference, it's a great policy. I just wondered why they limited just to COVID-19, because at some point, there could be some other type of crises. And so they'd have to write a whole new policy for each individual crisis. But
Right.
again, it's still good.
Yes.
Okay, I need a motion.
I've made one.
Made one.
Caleb seconded.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. And any other comments before we adjourn? I
Go.
would just like to thank the staff. I thank you all so much, everybody, for setting this room up in the manner that it is designed, and we're still following the governor's rules as well and guidelines and who, WHO references and guidelines, infection control, because I'm a stickler about infection control, and it's not just because I'm a nurse, but because that's the way I am. And I'm a little, so I want to say that you all have met the criteria from my perspective, and I thank you for designing the room in a manner that keeps us safe.
Thank you. Deb Baker did this for us.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks too to our team. I know while the rest of the world is slowing down and staying home, this is as crazy as it gets down here. And the public should know that there are people here really risking themselves, I mean, to make sure we get this election locked down. So just, again, I've been on this board 12 years. We've been through some crazy things, but this is by far the craziest thing we've seen. I just want to thank Sherry and Sally and the entire leadership team and every employee who's here. They should know that the board recognizes what a crazy time it is for them, and that I just want to be supportive. I think I speak for all the board when I
Yes,
say
you
that.
do.
So if we can do something, from our perch up here on the board to help, let us know, whether that's getting the word out or just trying to help find extras, whatever's necessary. I'm available, and we'll try to my level best to help us get through a difficult time. And I know this is something we definitely agree on. So
Absolutely.
thank you all very much.
Okay.
You're here.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, before we,
Yes.
we discussed another meeting between now and the 28th. We need to be here on the evening of the 28th, I would imagine. So what time would you want us here on the 28th?
On the 28th,
Would be declaring the polls closed?
actually, you would have more remakes since the
Oh, we have
polls.
remakes, right.
Yeah, you had declared the polls open, but then the polls were declared closed by the state. So we don't need to take that action, I don't believe. But we will have remakes. So I think 6:30 PM. That would allow time for you to vote on remakes and scan those before 7:30.
Okay.
But you indicated there's going to be a meeting or two before even that.
Yes, I
Most
think.
likely.
Most
which makes
likely,
sense.
yes. I think if we could get a handle on what comes in, what ballots come in through the mail, probably middle of next week, then we could circulate an email suggesting a special meeting date and time for those remakes.
Okay. So none of us have to worry about being out of town. We're staying at home.
It's true. Won't be out to dinner either, so.
No, we won't.
Just one quick comment. Looking forward to November, it strikes me as quite likely that there's going to be a huge emphasis on voting by mail. I was a little disappointed to see that the mailing from the Secretary of State did not include an application the way has been true in presidential years. So folks still had to call here or do something else to get that application rather than having just received one in the mail. I would really hope that by the time we get to November, that we do get a mailing from the Secretary of State that does include an application.
That decision is up to the General Assembly.
I know.
And I believe that for the November general election, funds had already been allocated to mail applications to every voter. I believe that's accurate. I can double check with the Secretary of State's office, but I believe the General Assembly had already allocated funds for that even before COVID-19 came into the picture. But I can double check with the Secretary on that.
Great. Good point. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? Need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. That motion carries. This meeting is officially adjourned at 9:06 a.m. in the morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.